The night was quiet, until it was not. Out on the cold, flat Atlantic, the sea was a sheet of black glass under a starless sky. A man in his cabin wrote in a small notebook, the ink flowing smoothly from his pen. Then, the great ship shook. It was not a violent crash, but a long, grinding shudder felt deep in its bones. The man's pen moved slower now, a little unsteady. He wrote 2 words that would be found later, a small voice from a great and terrible night. Ice ahead. That single line, a simple observation, marks the beginning of the end. It is one of the last quiet notes from the people aboard the RMS Titanic, and it asks a single haunting question. Why did some voices from that night live on, while so many others fell silent forever? This is not a story you think you know. It is not a dry list of names, a tally of the saved and the lost. This is a human puzzle, a slow-burn mystery unfolding in the final, desperate minutes. It is a story with a hero, a man surrounded by the hum of technology, whose fingers held the power to connect worlds. It is a story of choices, of fatal mistakes, and of the purest, most unbelievable luck. It has people who spoke, their voices carried across the water, and it has people who never had a chance to speak at all. Buried beneath a century of myth and romance is a truth that still feels urgent, a truth that matters as much today, May 27, 2026, as it did on that freezing night in 1912. We will not follow a famous man in a fine suit or a woman clutching her jewels. Our protagonist is a man most people never saw, tucked away in a small, cluttered room. His name was Jack Phillips. He was the senior wireless operator on duty that night. He was young, dedicated, and he loved his work. He enjoyed the magic of sending messages out into the vast emptiness, of speaking to ships near and far. His world was the Marconi wireless room, a space that hummed with the energy of dynamos and glowed with the light of vacuum tubes. He typed fast, his fingers a blur over the telegraph key. That night, he was busy. The airwaves were full of messages, personal notes from wealthy passengers, and crucially, warnings about ice from other ships. The conflict begins not with a bang, but with a whisper of steel on ice. The ship was new, a titan of engineering. She was called unsinkable. Stokers in the boiler rooms, millionaires on the promenade deck believed it. Jack Phillips felt the shudder. He was sitting at his post, headphones pressed to his ears, listening to the crackle and pop of the airwaves. The slight jolt was enough to make him look up from his logbook. It was unusual, but not yet alarming. For a few minutes, the ship continued on its path, the engines still turning. Then a visitor arrived at their door. It was Captain Edward Smith. His face was grim. He instructed Phillips to prepare to send out a call for assistance. Phillips prepared his key. Jack began to tap out the standard distress signal of the time. CQD, come quick, danger, CQD, CQD, CQD. He sent the ship's call letters, MGY. He sent their coordinates. His message was a voice of pure information, a plea sent into the void. It was a race against the clock, though no one yet knew how little time they had. The signal, powered by the ship's massive generators, radiated outward in all directions. It flew by radio waves to other ships plowing through the same dark ocean. One of those ships was the Cunard liner RMS Carpathia, more than 58 nautical miles away. Her radio operator, Harold Cottam, had been about to turn in for the night. By a stroke of luck, he decided to listen in one last time. He heard the call. He woke his captain. Could this single act of diligence save them? Jack Phillips was now the most important man on the Titanic. The fate of over 2,000 souls rested in part on his shoulders and the strength of his signal. As the ship began to list, Harold Bride suggested they try the new distress signal, SOS. It was easier to transmit and understand. Phillips, with a weary smile, agreed. He alternated between the two calls, his transmission growing more frantic. "We are sinking fast," he typed. Passengers are being put into boats." His voice, translated into dots and dashes, was a running commentary of the disaster. Other ships heard the call. The Olympic, Titanic's sister ship, was too far away. The Frankfurt offered help, but seemed not to grasp the urgency. The Californian was the closest, but its sole radio operator had already gone to bed. The wireless room, once a place of routine, became a sanctuary of hope and a center of rising panic. The power from the ship's dynamos began to fail. The signal weakened. The hum of the equipment faltered. Jack worked on, even as the deck tilted beneath his chair. Water began to creep into the cabin. Bride helped him with his life jacket. Phillips never stopped transmitting. The initial impact was strangely subtle. For many passengers, it was no more than a faint vibration. Some who were awake and on deck saw the Iceberg glide past. Bits of ice fell onto the forward well deck. A few passengers playfully kicked them around, unaware that below the waterline, 6 of the ship's 16 watertight compartments had been breached. The design was flawed. As the bow dipped, water would inevitably spill from one compartment into the next, like water filling an ice cube tray. The ship was mortally wounded, but her death would be slow. This slowness created a false sense of security. The lights burned brightly. The ship's orchestra began to play cheerful ragtime to keep spirits up. This atmosphere of normalcy was a poison. Women and children were reluctant to go. Why trade a brilliantly lit giant for a small wooden boat on a freezing, dark ocean? The first lifeboat to be launched left with only 28 aboard. Was this calm courage or a fatal miscalculation? As time stretched on, reality became undeniable. The sounds of the night changed. Cheerful music gave way to hymns, murmurs to shouts, cries, and frantic orders. The great vessel was losing its fight. The final 10 minutes were a descent into chaos. The stern rose, the lights died, and a roar of sliding cargo, splintering wood, and human screams filled the dark. Then, a deafening split. The ship broke in two. The bow went first, the stern rose, and then plunged. Who was left on deck in those final, terrifying moments? Not everyone on the Titanic had the same chance to hear the music or see the lifeboats. The ship was a floating microcosm of Edwardian society, rigidly stratified by class. Upper decks, private promenades, direct routes. Information flowed, crew attentive. Third class lived deep below, far from the boats, in a labyrinth of narrow passageways. Regulations kept gates closed. Some stayed shut, by order or confusion, with too few crew to guide hundreds. Over 60% of first class survived, around 42% in second, only 25% in third. First class women, 97%. Third class women, 46%. In third class children, 52 of 79 died. The ship's architecture became a blueprint for who lived and who died. Did a locked gate or a confusing hallway seal more fates than the iceberg itself? Officers concentrated topside. Many below were told to wait. By the time they reached the boat deck, chaos peaked and boats were gone. Their voices were lost in noise and distance. Physically and socially at the bottom, a position that proved a death sentence. Survival was not just about class. It was a game of timing and luck, played out in excruciatingly small increments. The collision happened at 11:40 p.m. The first lifeboat launched at 12:45 a.m. Disbelief bred delay. Early boats left mostly empty. Those who waited faced a desperate scramble. Choices in a split second had permanent consequences. Benjamin Guggenheim changed into evening wear to go down as a gentleman. Others threw their wives and children into boats, then stepped back. Second Officer Charles Lytler enforced women and children only on port. First Officer William Murdoch allowed men to fill empty seats on starboard. Where you stood could decide life or death. Luck, awake versus asleep, a clear path, a nearby boat being loaded. In 28 degrees Fahrenheit water, survival was near impossible, yet a few were lucky. The baker Joughin, drinking heavily, treaded water until hauled onto an overturned boat. Miracle or strange quirk of science? Harold Bride was washed off, found himself under an overturned collapsible, then climbed atop with others, including Light Orb. They balanced all night, feet numbed in ice. Jack Phillips reached the hull but died before rescue. 2 men side by side, 2 fates, separated by inches in endurance. Why does fortune favor one and not another in the same moment? In a crisis, leadership is everything. The chain of command frayed. Captain Smith, on his final voyage, seemed at times paralyzed by indecision. Orders vague, officers interpreting as they saw fit. Inconsistency meant a man's chance could hinge on which side of the deck he chose. Some calmly loaded boats, others abandoned posts. Rumors spread like wildfire. White distress rockets were mistaken as fireworks. The nearby Californian saw them but did not understand. Her captain waited for morning, a decision that haunted him. Some lied to keep calm. Thomas Andrews told the truth. Put on life belts and get to the boats. Now. The Titanic was the pinnacle of technology, but it was a flawed machine operated by fallible humans. A simple pair of binoculars might have bought seconds to steer clear. Bow rivets of lower quality made steel more brittle in the cold. Radio was new, noisy, unregulated. No dedicated distress channel. He acknowledged a critical warning but may not have passed it to the bridge. A systemic failure prioritizing commerce over safety. Frustrated, Phillips snapped at the Californian. Its operator turned in. Minutes later, Titanic struck ice. The radio could reach hundreds of miles but couldn't bridge the gap to the bridge. The machine was powerful. The human system was broken. In the final darkness and impossible tilt, quiet courage appeared. Stewards helping mothers and children into swaying boats. The band playing a final hymn. Acceptance without panic. Where you go, I go. A priest hearing confessions. 35 engineers kept power for evacuation and wireless. None survived. Phillips's dots and dashes were the first draft. A plea that helped save 705. Their testimonies spoke of cold, screams fading, and silence. Why care now? Because we too trust complex systems, algorithms, and unsinkable beliefs. The lesson is human, safety versus profit, who we hear in crisis, who gets a lifeboat. We still miss critical warnings in the noise.